Hello, I'm Matt Williamson at Williamson NFL. What is happening? Not a ton in the NFL world. You know, Garrett Wilson's getting an extension. There's some things like that. No Watt news necessarily. People asking for trades. We talked about Jennings here and there. There's some rumblings. Camp's around the corner. Some rookies are already in camp. So there is some things kind of happening. Things are starting to brew. But as I mentioned, I get a lot of traction out of these two heavy analytical guides that have come out the last couple of weeks. Warren Sharp's and FTN Fantasies, which used to be Football Outsiders, Aaron Schatz. They're kind of the first one that started doing these things. And really wanted to stress some of the stuff on offense. A lot of tendencies, a lot of trends from this team, good and bad, but they really dig in. And I'm curious how that'll change, how they're recognizing that. So we know that Arthur Smith used a ton of 3 tight end formations, most in the league in terms of 3 tight ends on the field. How on earth does that not maintain? I mean, you just traded for a tight end that's as good as the 2 guys you had. So maybe that even spikes. But what I didn't realize until this was, and now it's a somewhat small sample size, but it's bigger than any other offense in the league. When they were in 13 personnel, 1 back, 3 tight ends, 1 receiver, which I expect we'll see a ton of, they were really bad. Their EPA, their DVOA, yards per play, explosiveness, really bad. So their 13 personnel stuff was a problem. And I can't just say that's all on Connor Hayward or Michael Pruitt, you know. And I don't blame necessarily Freiermuth or Washington, you know. So is that an Arthur Smith thing? Will Smith put them over the top? Jonnu, sorry. With the 13 personnel stuff, because we're going to see it a lot. I hope they recognize that when you just break down the numbers when they were in 13 personnel, it was quite poor. Now, by no means am I saying abandon that. Not at all. I think lean into it heavier. Maybe that's what they're doing with Jonnu, and make it something that you become really good at. Maybe it needs practiced more. I don't know. I'm going to be very attentive at that at training camp. The other thing they did was they max protected. I think that means, I do know what it means. It means 7 protectors at the second highest rate in the league. That doesn't shock me either because of all the deep balls. You know, like if you're going to go super deep, asking 5 to hang in there when might as well keep it back in, keep Washington in, whoever. So that doesn't shock me at all either. So max protect, will that still be a thing? Could be. You know, I mean, Jones was also hard to trust, as was some others throughout the course of the year. But all in all, I think the line protection-wise wasn't bad. Hopefully it's not terrible that you have to rely on it. But max protecting at the second highest mark, I thought was very noteworthy. The other thing, which I'm sure shocks none of you, but anyone's listened to me for years and years talking about the Steelers, every offseason I would just harp, why are they the bottom of the league in play action percentage? Why are they, year after year after year. So that changed, finally. So they were 29th in frequency of play action in 2023, just 15%. They moved all the way up to 7th highest in 2024. At 27%. That's going to keep up. Now, that's part of the foundation. That's going to keep up. Get used to it. Finally. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. With baseball season in full swing, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. We keep the dog days of summer rolling with the largest selection of odds on everything. With updated odds on the MLB, UFC, and boxing to tennis and NFL futures, BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. Some of these things might not totally shock you, but one thing that Football Outsiders has always done, and when we start talking defense, we'll get to this too, is they will deem a wide receiver, the wide receiver 1 and the wide receiver 2 in terms of importance. And a lot of it they base off of how defenses play you, where the ball goes, of course. And in some teams, I'm sure that's not easy to tell. But with the Steelers last year, it was pretty easy to tell. But this I thought was pretty shocking, that the Steelers threw a league low 11% of targets to the receiver they had designated as wide receiver 2. Usually Van Jefferson through the course of the year. At times, I'm sure that was Austin, but only 11% to your number 2 wide receiver on any given pass play. Remarkably low. I don't think you want to live that way. I think that is an Arthur Smith thing, but I don't think you want to be that strong, because having Van Jefferson out there doing cardio doesn't do you any good, or helping block here or there, or not being any kind of threat whatsoever. I still think the need for another receiver is prominent, and I still think Austin/Roman, whoever the 2 is on any given play, should demand more than 11%. Okay, so there's some alignment stuff here I think is interesting. Darius Slayton was the only wide receiver that received a higher percentage of his targets on the outside, not on the slot, than DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf got 92% of his targets aligned as an outside receiver. Now, that was a different coaching staff and a different team in Seattle, but I don't think that's going to change much. I mean, Pickens was high on that list as well. I don't know what his percentage is off the top of my head, but I would imagine that's what he is. That's what I thought he was coming out of college. You know, I mean, will he move to the slot a little more? Will he get a lower percentage than 92%? Possibly, but you kind of know where he is. And that leads me to this tight end situation. You don't think about Freiermuth as a detached pseudo wide receiver, but 74% of his targets came when he was aligned in the slot or out wide. His targets, but detached from the formation. Only Mike Gesicki, who really is a glorified wide receiver, doesn't block anybody, and Mark Andrews were higher. Now, will that change with Jonnu in the mix? Because I think Jonnu on the tight end spectrum is closer to a wide receiver than Freiermuth is. I would think it does change some. But here's the interesting part of it. Only 23% of Darnell Washington's targets came in the slot or out wide. Same position. 74% of targets. Now remember, Washington doesn't have as many targets. Versus 23% of Washington's. Only Josh Oliver and Johnny Munt were lower. You probably don't even know who those guys are, but they're pure blocking tight ends, don't get any targets. Is part of the reason that their 13 personnel stuff was problematic is because you always knew where these guys are at? Will they be changing their alignment more with Jonnu Smith in the mix? I would expect more of Freiermuth's targets to come from an inline position with Smith in the mix. I'm not saying you're going to take Darnell Washington and put him outside the numbers and run go routes, folks, and comebacks, but maybe you could do a little more movement with him. Interesting. As we all know, Zach Frazier's really good. And I'll be honest, stats for O-linemen aren't exactly my bag. So if these are 1 or 2 off, so be it. But still, he played 975 snaps. Pretty much the whole season, Only what they deemed 2 blown blocks in the run game all year. Only 1 sack allowed all year. And an NFL best pressure rate among centers. And that comes straight from the league. That's NFL.com, advanced stats, next gen, whatever. Best pressure rate allowed of all centers. Only 1 sack allowed. And only 2 blown blocks in the run game. Now, that doesn't mean every other block he made in the run game, he put the guy on his back or even won the rep, but just totally blew the block only twice. Last thing I have for you, and this is bound to get worse, to get more difficult on the offense, is only the Bills and Packers started drives with better field position than the Steelers' offense. Why is that? Well, a lot of their drives started off turnovers. They're one of the best teams in the league at creating turnovers. Therefore, you might get the ball at midfield as opposed to the 20 or 30 or, the touchback or whatever. That's going to get better, or that's probably going to get worse. I mean, that chances are you're going to be back to the middle of the pack. Now, we're only talking an average of a yard or two, but over the course of the year, field position is a big deal, especially for a team that struggled to move the football and get first downs and score points. And we knew everything was an uphill climb for this offense to begin with. Well, they didn't have to start so far down that hill to climb up it as everyone else did. Bills and Packers were the other team. By the way, the Bills had an obscene turnover differential. By far the best in the league. Steelers were only behind them. That's where that came from. All right, everyone. So, good stuff. We will dig into the defensive side of this. I have some even more notes there. Probably do a mailbag to wrap up the week and all that good stuff. All right, see ya.